Yes. I will call the meeting to order at 6:02. And welcome everybody. And we will start with the flag salute. Lisa, who normally leads the flag salute?
You can, or whoever you'd like to choose.
Oh, I would love to. I've always wanted to do that. Okay. All right. So I will lead us in the flag salute. So we want to mute microphones for the flag salute. Thank you. And ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And now it's time for the roll call. Lisa, can you take the roll call, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Goff.
Present.
Commissioner Edry.
Here.
Commissioner Herman.
Here.
Commissioner Lopez.
Here.
Commissioner Navarez.
Here.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. Okay, so now it's time for approval of the agenda. Lisa, do we have any changes to the agenda?
We do. Thank you. Staff would request that item number 3, which is the Vernon housing element update, be moved to the beginning of the meeting to immediately follow public comment. And it would be appropriate for there to be a motion to approve the agenda with item number 3 moved to the beginning. When making motions, please be sure to state your name so that I know who made the motion.
Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move Lopez with the change for item number 3 to be heard first.
Second?
And I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
I need to call the roll
sorry.
for each vote since we're teleconferencing. Motion by Commissioner Lopez, seconded by Commissioner Herman to approve the agenda with item number 3 moved to the beginning of the meeting. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Goff.
Aye.
Commissioner Edry.
Aye.
Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now we can move on to public comment.
Yes.
We will now take public comments from members of the audience. If you would like to provide a public comment through the Zoom, please click the raise your hand button. At this time, the public is encouraged to address the Vernon Housing Commission and will be given the opportunity to address the commission on any matter that has been described in the agenda for this evening. Do we have anybody wishing to speak?
Yes, I have one raised hand from Crystal Latios.
Okay, would you please state your name and business affiliation, if any, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. This is Crystal Latios. I did have a public comment. So I'm a resident of the 50th Street Apartments, and I just want to check in and see if there was anything that could be done to revise the current asking price for the homes. I'm really interested in staying in Vernon and being a part of the community, but it seems discouraging to pay twice as much rent for the same units that are already being rented. I understand market value has gone up, but I believe a more reasonable increase can be achieved. That's all.
And I believe, are you addressing item number 4, housing unit rental rates?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll consider those comments when we get to that item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Any other raised hands?
There are none at this time.
Crystal, go ahead and lower your raised hand for us, okay? All right, thank you. We now can go to the consent calendar. Okay.
We're going to actually go to item number 3 at this time.
Oh, we're going to skip. Okay, go right to item number 3. Okay. All righty. All right, we're going to item number 3, which is new business and
I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
So item number 3 is Vernon Housing Element Update, and Public Works Director Wall will present the report.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Every 8 years, the state requires cities and counties to update their housing elements And under Vernon's municipal code, it is the Housing Commission's duty to advise the City Council on matters relating to the housing element. We have with us this evening Phil Burns from the Arroyo Group, who will make a presentation on the draft housing element update. And with that, Phil.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Chair Goff and commissioners, pleasure to see you this evening and be able to address you. Some of you know I'm Phil Burns. I've been working with the Public Works Department on the West Side Specific Plan. And the West Side Specific Plan project, as you probably know, is closely linked to the question of housing in the city of Vernon. So we are also preparing the housing element. And that's why I'll be giving you this brief presentation here. Brief, however, probably has quite a number of items that will be of interest to the commission to sort of rethink the future of housing within the city. So, all right. Very good. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. All right. So we're going to talk about the housing element today. And the first thing that we, of course, need to review is what is a housing element. Probably most of you know, but
Yes.
just to review it. Great. Glad that you do. Housing element is part of the city's general plan. And the general plan is, something that we think of as like the constitution of a city. It really is the long-term vision for how the city will evolve, reflecting the values and priorities of the community. And there are 8 required elements in the general plan. The housing element is the most regulated element of all of them. And it needs to be updated every 8 years and reviewed by the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, at the state level. The state reviews every city's housing element basically to determine whether each city is doing its part in addressing the state's overall housing needs and indeed the housing crisis that we are in general across the state. The primary way that the state does that is through what's called the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Vernon, being a very small city in terms of residents, has luckily a very small RHNA that it needs to accommodate, which is only 9 units, as you see here in this table. However, as we have those of you who have been serving on the West Side Specific Plan Stakeholders Committee know, we discussed that there are other reasons why the city of Vernon, may need to expand quite a bit. It's housing, the number of residents that are in the city. And really the key question is, what is the next evolution of Vernon? Right? Vernon has been an exclusively industrial city for almost 100 years at this point. And that has created a lot of wonderful conditions for the businesses that have located in this city. But a downside of the very small population was obviously the lack of transparency and governance and good governance that the city had for much of that period. And even though today, we are certainly beyond that era that was in the past, it is a long-term threat. It is a weak point in the city that the voting population continues to be so small within city borders. And so you all 5 years ago constructed the Vernon Village Park development, and indeed, we see that there is still a need to expand the voting population further. Now, as you look at expanding population, it can be done in a way similar to Vernon Village Park. pick an area on the very fringe of the city. It's an area, those might be areas in which, people are not particularly attracted to living, but you build an affordable housing development. There's so much demand for affordable housing, somebody's going to live there. But you probably already know also the downsides with only having affordable housing within the city's boundaries. And so an alternative strategy, the strategy that the West Side Specific Plan has been working on, is really, can Vernon create an exciting environment that is not just a place for people to live, but actually reinvigorates the local industrial manufacturing production scene, which is really seen, really across central Los Angeles, is it's really growing in mixed use areas where people come together, where they can design together, create together, live, work, and do business together. And so the focus of the West Side Specific Plan, which, in turn means a focus in a change in direction for housing, at least within these small areas within the West Side of Vernon, is to target new multifamily residential and mixed-use development, along with, as a part of a kind of constellation of different uses that can grow in the more historic parts of the West Side of Vernon. And so, having said all that, I guess, want to come back to then what are the goals that we have proposed for this housing element as we zoom back out kind of to the whole city. Okay. The first goal then, in service of those objectives that I've just mentioned, is to have new and quality housing to attract and accommodate a broad, diverse, and engaged citizenry. And that's kind of perhaps maybe the big change in the meta goal there. Goal number 2 is attractive, livable, and healthy environments for the maintenance of all housing units in the city. The third goal is decent, safe, and sanitary construction and maintenance of all the units in the city. And then finally, the fourth goal, diversity, transparency, and equal housing opportunity in the ownership and occupancy of the city's housing stock. So now we can talk about the different things that this housing element proposes in 2 different buckets. So the first one is everything relating to the existing housing in the city. And then we'll come back and talk about new housing that could be constructed within the city. The draft housing plan, and by the way, just called it draft housing plan for purposes of today, because it's not yet the entire complete housing element, although it's really the most substantive parts of the housing element that you have before you. The draft housing plan, it makes reference to a lot of the things that you are already doing as a city and as a housing commission, which would start with the maintenance of the city-owned residences. The city has renovated, 24 of the 26 units relatively recently, and the draft housing plan expresses a commitment to renovate the last 2 units during the 6th cycle, aka during the next 8 years. Another one of the current procedures that is referred to in this draft housing plan is the lottery system, which you all administer, and which ensures transparency in the selection and approval of tenants for city-owned housing. Okay, we're going to move on to some kind of new things related to the existing housing in the city. One of the issues that has been recognized for a long time is that the current housing units are actually non-conforming vis-a-vis the city's zoning. They're located within industrial zones. They're not in the housing overlay zone. This our proposal is to basically create a residential zoning district so that all of those housing units can be within, can be conformed to zoning. And then the question maybe arises of, well, should they be zoned only for single family or should they be multifamily? Obviously, there's some single family and some multifamily within the city right now. Given that SB 9 basically eliminates single family on the zoning, it does eliminate single family on the zoning in the city. Anyway, our recommendation would be to basically put a medium density residential designation over all the areas where housing currently is, allowing a couple of units to be built for property that could allow for some growth in the future should the city or any future property owner decide to do that. And Vernon is also obligated to have an accessory dwelling unit ordinance as well, which would allow for ADUs to be built in the city. Okay, so now another topic here is related to ownership of the city-owned housing stock. Now, the city-owned housing stock has been owned by the city for a long time, to the best of my knowledge, successfully, well-maintained, decent housing. But certainly, at times in the past, this was used in ways which were not, not what we would desire from a public entity. And so over the long term, the question arises of, is it better to actually let the city-owned housing go back into private hands and be administered as private housing as the vast majority of housing in other cities is? And I know this would be a big topic for discussion, I would assume. This draft housing plan only suggests that a study be undertaken to look at the different options which might be available if the city walks down this road, and be able to explore them further. So there might be sale to the existing tenants. It might be sale, as affordable homeownership. It might be sale at market rate, highest bidder. It could be retaining ownership of the land long-term and just selling the structures. All of those are potentials for this. Okay, having said that, let's move on to new housing. So more coming here. The new housing is, the proposal is to have new housing basically concentrated in those areas within the West Side specific plan where the environment can be made hospitable for that kind of development, and actually where it can achieve synergies with commercial development, with production, retail, light industrial kind of development, artistic development, all of those kinds of things, and not spread it out across the city. Within these focused areas, residential, mixed use, live work, all options. Permitting should be by right for most of those kinds of projects. Indeed, we are obligated by HCD to make sure that we can at least fulfill the RENA with by right entitlement processes. And then the specific plan will also address all of those environmental issues. It'll address infrastructure, environmental standards, commercial amenities, recreational amenities for the folks who will live there, who will probably be more singles and childless couples types of people. And also, promote street design near these developments, which ameliorates the impacts of freight travel and or reduces freight travel. So for those who are not familiar with the West Side specific plan and discussions that I've been having around that. Here you can see kind of the majority of the area here, Santa Fe coming down this way, Vernon and Pacific right there. Basically 2 areas going to be targeted for residential development. The first is right here in the center of the city, by City Hall and by the corner of Santa Fe, Vernon, and Pacific. And this would be an area where actually, hopefully a lot of commercial amenities will come in, but residential, be part of the mix as well. And then the other area being the southern part of Santa Fe, which is closer to Huntington Park and has a number of good historic structures which are apt for adaptive reuse into live, work, or residential kinds of uses as well. One of the key things that makes all of this possible, is really to have, to alter how Santa Fe functions as a street, making it a street that's more hospitable to residential development. And on the converse, really strengthening Alameda East over here as a much more effective truck corridor than it is currently, so that trucks are shifted basically off of Santa Fe and onto Alameda East. All right, so I'll move on here then. And the next thing that is proposed as a program in the draft housing plan is a marketing program, which will, help, for example, to identify a development coordinator or hire a development coordinator at the city who can, garner more interest among developers, among folks who would like to come and set up businesses within the West Side or come and live within the West Side, do their creative activities within the West Side. All of those kinds of things we think is something that's going to be important to making this plan viable as well. One of the key actions will be the use of the Petrelli Electric and City Yard property that is just west of City Hall for a residential mixed-use development. And this is suggested because, of course, it is city property. It is something that can be done quite quickly. And the city would issue an RFP for development of this site and seeking basically the maximum density residential development possible, which would increase, the electorate, increase the population of the city by a large amount. We think that over 300 units can be built on the property, and the redevelopment of this area would also include a revisioning of the City Hall Plaza as an actual kind of Vernon Plaza gathering space for the city, ringed with, with new retail that could be constructed into the bottom floor of the parking garages surrounding the plaza. So having things like sandwich shop, coffee shop, FedEx office, things like that, things that, the residents would appreciate, also things that I think all of the business community of Vernon would probably appreciate having in the center of the city. Okay, so those are kind of big moves, I suppose, related to new housing and particularly the West Side specific plan. Talk about a couple of other housing related issues here. One is that the city has received many requests from industrial business owners to allow caretaker housing on their facilities. And if you're not familiar with caretaker housing, it's basically when you have, maybe one, maybe up to 3 units on the property that is there for an employee to be able to stay there with their family and, take care of the property, right? Produce, kind of be security for the property on a 24/7 basis. So LA allows this by right. A lot of other cities like Inglewood and El Segundo also allow it by right. The draft housing plan proposes that Vernon also allow this, although not necessarily everywhere within the city. Have to look at that, but certainly within many industrial areas in the city. And then finally as well, employee workforce housing as kind of another thing to encourage. Employee workforce housing is basically, housing that is for the employees of a particular business. One of the things that we should say is that while this is a really good thing in general that reduces transportation costs and traffic, and can help businesses retain employees because they have employees living nearby. It's also important to not let, kind of an over concentration, to not let, for example, the majority of the housing in the city all be controlled by one company, as that could be a kind of over concentration of power in the city. That being said, in a limited means, employee workforce housing is a great opportunity for businesses in the city that I know their employees are struggling with extremely high housing costs in all of the nearby areas. An example of an employer that's doing this right now is LAUSD, which is building affordable housing for its teachers, for its janitors, for other types of employees, helping them to live within the communities that they actually serve on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so as we close out the presentation here, I just wanted to say, obviously the primary goal of this presentation is to receive your feedback on all of this that has been covered, the goals, policies, programs, the rest of the draft housing plan, which is attached to your staff report. And then there are also a couple of other questions that we have that can help us kind of fill in some of the gaps maybe that we have in remaining parts of the housing element that we need to be able to submit this to HCD. You see some of the questions there about the state of the existing housing, you who are residents, how you perceive that, how you perceive the environmental conditions impacting the residents, and what recommendations you have about project design to ameliorate those issues. And then also about special needs populations in the city. If there are folks that fall under any of these categories, I know there certainly are seniors in the community, and whether any of these populations face any particular barriers in securing safe and affordable housing in the city. With that, I will hand it back to Dan.
And so if the commission would like to discuss any of the goals that were presented in the draft, or answer any of the questions that Phil posed on his last slide, now would be the time to do that.
I do have a concern. I feel that 300 units in that small corner area is extremely too many. It would be highly congested. We already have a problem with traffic down Santa Fe, and I think it would really increase that. There's a school right across the street. Like, we already handle a lot of different people that come in and out of the city, and to try and squeeze in 300 units, it sounds a bit extreme in that tiny little area.
I think I can, if I may, Councilmember Lopez, I can speak to the reason for that. Because that is city property, it is subject to the Surplus Land Act, which was approved by the state in 2019. And what the Surplus Land Act says is that any city-owned property that is going to be developed has to be offered for 100% affordable housing, unless it is a development of over 300 units in which 25% of the units are affordable. So unfortunately, if the density is less, the city would be required to offer that up for, more income restricted, affordable housing. And, if there is a proposal made by a developer for that, the city would have to accept that proposal and construct affordable housing on the property.
I think that that's something that should be looked at a little further, just because, like I said, 300, I understand what you're saying about the Surplus Land Act. However, I still think it's way too many to accommodate in that tight little area. I think it's something that we should look at because, affordable housing is something that's really needed in LA County, as we know. A lot of families are suffering because of the pandemic and so forth. And I think that that's something that should be looked at more, because I think 300 units is a lot. Like, that's just saying like 2 people live in each, that's 600 additional people in one small area.
Marlene, would you like to make a comment or ask a question?
Yes. Regarding that same area.
Can't hear you.
Oh, you guys did a mic check. Can you hear me?
A little better. Just go ahead and start talking. Let's see.
Okay. In regarding to that same area in this template, well, it talks about 20 small lot singles, bungalow style in that area. And on the presentation, you're showing 300.
Yes, we have to demonstrate to the state that the property has enough capacity under the kind of development that there's a proven market for in Vernon to meet the RHNA, to meet the 9 units. And so, while there's been feasibility analyses done on the 300 unit development that show that it is indeed feasible to build it, I think HCD might have questions about, there hasn't been any project of this size built in the city. And so how do you know for sure that you can achieve this kind of project? And so our goal was just to say, hey, we know for sure we could do this, and that meets the 9. So it's just a compliance thing, and doesn't really reflect the full vision of city staff. Yes.
Are you good, Marlene, for now?
For now. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask my question and then I'm going to go to Rana, Steve, and then Jorge. Okay. I want to go back to what Leticia's comment and concern about affordable housing, because I totally 100% agree. But I want to bring to the group's attention that one of our other challenges, besides not having a larger voter pool, is having people that can qualify to run for city council. So I think, that's something that we really need to keep in the forefront of making sure that we have the ability to provide both things that the city needs and that the community at large needs. So whether or not we can really put 300 people in there, I'm not sold on they're going to fix the traffic problem by, taking it off Santa Fe and fixing Alameda. I'm not yet convinced. I'm skeptical of the 300 units as well. But if we can find a location that we can put that kind of a development on to give us and maybe use that area for a lower density, development to increase the affordable housing. But we still need to make sure we have housing for people that can and be qualified to serve, to run for office, because that's also a concern. That was my comment, not a question. And Ronna, you're next.
So my concern is, you mentioned something about having to reroute the trucks to Alameda. Was this something that, have you conducted any type of research on the impact for the warehouses and the manufacturers just east of Santa Fe? Because that might become an issue. They're already experiencing a major crisis with the container delays, shortage of truck drivers, shortage. There's a major crisis as it is. Did we consider the consequences of this and the effects to the warehouses and the manufacturing industry in Vernon?
Certainly, I certainly understand the skepticism. These are big changes, right, for a city that has operated in a similar fashion for a long time. And we don't take lightly kind of what impacts this can make. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, the moving of traffic is not necessarily something that happens on day one. I think that is a process that happens over time. Probably improvements can be made to Alameda first, and then restrictions can come to Santa Fe as a second phase. And but I will say that yes, we actually did a very detailed traffic study on the how this would work. We looked at data about where all the trucks are coming from and going to within this whole area, and did a traffic scenario modeling analysis, and then a detailed detailed traffic analysis and the conceptual sketches of each intersection and how it could be improved in order to accommodate the traffic. And I'm sorry that this isn't.
But Phil, when you just said about having it, fixing Alameda first before you put restrictions on Santa Fe, I've never done anything like this before, so I don't even know if this is possible. But can you can you have it contingent to, like, in other words, if we all support your plan and then council, and we endorse it to council and council votes on it, can we have a clause in there that says if we don't agree that you fix the Alameda problem, we're not willing to move forward on restrictions on Santa Fe? Can that be in the deal?
So if I may, so the housing element in front of you doesn't call for Santa Fe having reductions in traffic. So those reductions would be a completely separate process. We would make sure that improvements were made to Alameda first before we ever contemplated even reducing lanes on Santa Fe with just paint rather than permanently reducing lanes there. So we'd be very, very careful. We don't want to disrupt anyone's business. So we're going to tread very carefully on this. And again, the housing element doesn't call for these reductions to happen. So what we're looking at in the housing element is the changes in zoning and that kind of thing. And those would happen separately from any sort of reductions in traffic on Santa Fe.
Okay. Ronan, are you satisfied with, did you get your question answered for now?
I did, but my concern is, for instance, 38 in Santa Fe is a one-way. So if you were going to block that off on 38, there's going to be 2 or 3 warehouses that are not going to have an access through Alameda. Is this something that's going to be addressed? And I understand that's in the future, but there's no way other than to demolish a few warehouses to make room for trucks coming from Alameda.
It sounds like this is going to, that those elements will be addressed later. And that we're supposed to be focusing on the zoning piece. But I'm totally with you. So we're not gonna let that go. And I'm on the West Side Commission as well, study. Steve, you had a question.
Yes, I had one question. I had two questions actually. One is with regards to traffic. Would the plan be that the housing development would be able to exit to Santa Fe, or would it exit to Vernon, or would it have access to both roads to also reduce the amount of traffic on both those roads? Would it be split up between the two? I wasn't clear on that from the map you showed.
I think that all of that is, I mean, I can tell you that what we have anticipated is that access is from Vernon. Vehicular access is from Vernon. But those are things that can, it could be modified in the future once the actual development proposals come in and if the city so desires.
Okay, and one of the reasons I ask is I happen to work across the street from that site at Flowserve, and we have large trucks coming in and out of there, frequently permitted loads and things like that, which really do slow up traffic when we're bringing those in and out. So they don't happen that frequently. That's not a daily event, but that is certainly a multiple times in a month event. So, and the second question I had is there a plan in place then where we would move the city yard and Petrelli to? I work with both of them as well. So they would have a new location that's already been identified?
Yes, so we're looking at a city-owned property that is immediately adjacent to the power plant that the city owns. And we're looking to make modifications there to move the city yard operations. We're looking at one of the old fire stations to move Petrelli's operation to.
Okay, thank you.
Jorge, you're up.
I guess it's regarding it's at 342 units that they're proposing there, and I agree that it's seems like extremely high density. Are they calling that a medium density construction or a high density?
I would consider that high density. So
that's a really high density for that area. And again, I would agree. We have the school there, lots of truck traffic. Hannibal Industries is right there as well. They have, with their pallet racks and things, a lot of trucks coming in and out of there. Santa Fe, I'm on 49th in Santa Fe, and I see what it's like trying to get out of there in the middle of the day. And we're talking about adding at least 600 residents there. I'd also wonder are currently any cities seeking out any kind of challenges to the state mandated, density requirements? Is there any challenges to the state?
I have certainly heard that some cities are not happy with the requirements. I certainly have heard that. I'm not aware of any formal effort to try to repeal the act, however.
To try and challenge that and say, sorry, we just, we can't make that work. That'd be something I would look into or suggest we look into.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question and then I'll go to Marlene. Just so I'm clear. So relative to what we're supposed to be doing this on this draft housing element today, are we supposed to be endorsing the suggestion of the dense development near City Hall and the other area along Santa Fe? Are we specifically endorsing those locations, or are we just endorsing the idea that we're going to have some areas with increased housing?
So there is no official action that's being requested at this time. It's feedback on the draft as you have it within the staff report, attachment to the staff report. So the draft does refer to, that there are two focus areas within, or there are limited areas within the west side that are anticipated to be targeted for.
So what I'm hearing from our commissioners pretty solidly is that we're not in favor of supporting a high density development right near City Hall. That's what I'm hearing. And I personally think the focus should be along Pacific, closer to Slauson, where there are already existing amenities, and wasn't part of the presentation.
Yeah, well, the area along specific is, first of all, I think we have to recognize that Vernon only goes down to Fruitland, right? So the whole part south of Fruitland to Slauson is Huntington Park. So it has to be north of Fruitland, and that puts it, very close to the Malabar Rail Yard.
Okay.
It also puts it, I think we also have to look at where are the areas that we can create enough energy, excitement, like character in these areas where somebody who is not just looking for affordable housing, but somebody who's actually going to pay, a market rate rent, would actually want to move to there. And so the old buildings along Santa Fe, the opportunity for potential, commercial activities, industrial plus commercial activities, places where they can do art and, build products and things is something that I think we have to create an environment that is going to be attractive so that those people move in. If not, as you mentioned, Chair Goff, the city can do 100% affordable housing, and that's a wonderful thing for the region, but it's not going to give us people who can serve on city council.
And we desperately need to increase that population in addition to the voter population. And we lost that opportunity with the Vernon Village, even though it's a fabulous development.
Mm-hmm.
Marlene, you're next, and then Leticia.
Okay, I have two points. One, I live across the street from where you're proposing this.
Your audio is not coming in very clearly right now.
I have no idea. Can you guys hear me better? Can you hear me better?
Better, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I live across the street from this proposal, and during
You're cutting out. You're cutting out.
sorry. Okay, during peak hours, I mean, can you go to somebody else and I'll call?
I can't hear her.
If you can, Marlene,
I
could you
thi-
call in if you're having
I think
issues?
she wants to call in. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
she's asking
Yes,
to
okay.
call in.
Thank you, Leticia. Do you want to ask your question, Leticia, while we wait for Marlene to get on?
Sure. Well, it's a comment and a question. So I utilize, as we know, Santa Fe and Alameda are the main arteries into this city, in and out. And during peak hours, it is so congested, and it takes, half an hour, 35 minutes, 40 minutes just to get from the freeway to my home here on Vernon Avenue. So I just feel that, and I understand, like, that's the land that the city owns. And so we have more of a possibility to build there. However, I don't want to jam pack that one area just because that's all we have, because it's going to create a nightmare. It's already, I want to remain a business friendly city, because these businesses here in Vernon, they sustain the areas around us. So if businesses don't no longer want to be here because of the congestion, because of the traffic, because of the trucks have to be altered to go through different directions, then it's going to impact businesses. And that's going to directly impact the surrounding cities, which we help sustain. That's one thing. Another thing is a public safety concern. If you're going to bring in, I know Commissioner Nevares said 600. That's only anticipating that there's going to be 2 people occupying each of those 300 units, which would be completely minimal, right? So I feel that that's another issue. Public safety, the fact that businesses feel safe to have their businesses here, that residents feel safe, I think that that's going to be impacted as well. And we're going to have to increase police and public safety, and obviously it's going to take more money to do that, to operate that. So just some comments and suggestions. I just think it's a little much to just dump 300 units just because it's city-owned property, and we can. I think that more has to be looked at before we move forward with something like that.
Great comments. Marlene, can we hear you now? Almost. I had another question while we're waiting for Marlene. What is the reason for policy 4.7 about converting how is that going to, how are we as a city, are we going to gain by that policy? That's the one about converting the existing city-owned homes to private ownership. How is that going to make our city better?
Dan, would you like me to take this one, or would you like to respond to that?
Phil, you can go first on that and then I'll follow up.
Sure. So, yeah, this is something that is, I mean, this is a suggestion, right? And certainly.
I'm not against people owning their own homes. I want to be really clear, but I want to understand specifically how that's going to help our city.
Well, I think that if you look at what methods were used in the past to, kind of administer the city in an unfair way, certainly the use of city-owned housing for, personal political purposes was part of that. And so I know the Housing Commission does a great job in administering it today in a transparent way, but for long-term, to kind of create a long-term, so that could not happen again. That is, that was the thought there. That's the rationale behind doing it.
Right. And I would like to echo that. So it doesn't matter how honestly the lotteries are conducted. It's a vulnerability for the city from a perception standpoint. Since the city, through the Housing Commission, does control the lottery process, it becomes a vulnerability for somebody who wants to disparage our good governance practices by making accusations of a rigged process.
So are you proposing that they would be turned over to a management company as an alternative to being managed by the Housing Commission, which is a part of the city, or are you proposing them being sold off to private ownership, or both?
So we're not proposing anything at the moment.
That's not part of this right now. That's so I don't have to worry about that right now.
Right now, all that's being stated in the housing and the draft housing element is that this be something that be studied during the 8-year period.
Okay. Marlene, can we hear you now?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay. I have two comments. So the first one is going back to the parking. So I live across the street from the proposed area. And during peak hours, it's a hassle to even get into my driveway or even to get out. If you have 300 residents there, they're going to have a fit and not be happy with Vernon. That really needs to be addressed. The second thing goes to the caretaker housing. I could see where it comes from. However, I think it was just this year we took a survey for just first responders and found that there was no need for it. If there's no need for the first responders, I don't see why we would need a need for the caretaking housing. And maybe that's something that could be pushed in the next 8 years, because for the time being, I just don't see a need for that.
Councilmember Ibarra, I just want to clarify if perhaps your comment about first responders wanting to live in Vernon, is that perhaps more related to the employee workforce housing? The caretaker housing is for employees as well, but the function of it is more to provide security for the industrial property owner, for the industrial properties, during the nighttime hours and things like that.
I understand that part. And we had opened it up to the businesses where, hey, in case something happens, they had somebody there. But to even have somebody overwatch, it could be for whatever purposes that they feel they need. But like I said, I just don't see a need for that at this present moment.
At a session held by the Business and Industry Commission, they expressed a great deal of interest in providing employee housing. And that's when this discussion of business first responders having priority on city-owned housing lotteries came up. And they didn't want to limit that employee housing to being business first responders. They wanted to open it up to a preference for business employees. And so this helps to address that need on a larger scale than what could be provided with city-owned housing.
Marlene, I do know that from just over the years listening to different businesses that are much larger than mine, that there are businesses that like the idea of having a security person or a maintenance person that's able to live there in case there is something that happens, and it can just be there faster. I don't really have any sense or feel for how many businesses would take advantage of that caretaker option if we made it available. But I also agree that there are a lot of businesses that would like to help employees have workforce housing. But those are two different things.
I have a question in regards to the caretaker. Is for caretakers, are they able to vote as that becomes like their primary residence? Like, how does that work? So then that in an essence would help, right? Support to be able to have more voters. And then in addition, possibly people that are able to run for office, because I do agree with Vice Chair Goff that we do need qualified individuals to be able to come and live in Vernon and represent the city and run for office and so forth. So that's definitely something that we do need. So I'm just wondering how that caretaker possibility could play a role and help support that.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it would be their residents and they would be a voter and they would be eligible to run for office. And is that correct, Dan? Oh,
yes, that would be correct. So, so if that was established as their primary residence, then they would be voters.
So then that would assist and support that we don't need to add 300 units in one tight spot. And then we'd have additional voters and additional people being able to run if we were to go that route and approve caretakers. Have we taken a vote or like seen how many businesses would be interested in something like that? Is there a way to conduct a survey?
So a survey would be very difficult, but by allowing for caretaker housing, business owners would be voting by building the caretaker housing. Say that they put in a mezzanine above a warehouse space and built an apartment or two there for caretaker housing. That would show the interest. We could track that also through building permits. So we could know how many units we have. We would know what sort of increase in population we had achieved. But just taking a survey wouldn't necessarily reflect the reality of how many units would be built. By allowing those units to be built, we're just providing flexibility for business owners and at the same time providing flexibility for us to increase our population.
But Leticia, the chamber could do a survey of its members to find out if this was available, how many would be interested in taking advantage of that opportunity, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, I would be interested to kind of gauge what the interest is.
Yeah. Because you're right. I mean, if we have caretaker, that's an easy, quickly, if people wanted it, we would get some, and that would increase our voting population. That could also be eligible to serve on council. And then we could be more aggressive on lower income housing, and take advantage of that site that's near City Hall, but have a lower density development. And then like they've outlined along the area along Santa Fe, there's some buildings there that could be that, provide that sexy thing they're trying to go for.
That revamping.
Making us look like the arts district. I saw Ron had your hand up, but then you took it down. Is that right? Ron, did you
I did. I kind of just wanted to know, so are we deciding whether to consider it in the future, or are we moving on, or are we taking a vote on this, or it's just giving my understanding is we're not voting on anything, we're just giving our opinion. It's very preliminary.
So the housing element in and of itself doesn't present any projects to be built other than there's the mention that on the city-owned property, we could build 20 single-family units that could meet the RHNA numbers. And so Phil was showing what had been contemplated as part of the West Side project with the 300 units. But if you're recommending that the housing element be forwarded to the city council and adopted by the council, the 300 units is not part of the housing element. It's Phil presented that just to show you what had been going on the West Side project that ties into housing. But the housing element itself is not approving of a 300 unit project. That will be something that's done at a later time, and it will be presented to the Housing Commission as well as to the City Council. There would be an RFP that would be issued for developers. Developers would present their plans. A plan would be selected. We'd have to make sure that traffic concerns were addressed in the development, all that kind of thing. This by no means is just accepting a plan that Phil showed. Phil's plan is a conceptual plan of what is possible at that location.
Ronit, I think I was butchering your name. Please forgive me. I'll try to do better. Okay, I'm going to go to Marlene and then Steve and then Leticia.
Okay, going back to the caretaker, is there going to be a limit for that type of housing? How would the zoning be? And then a lot of these factories that have been there for many years, I know have contaminated soil. Is that going to be taken care of for them? Are they going to have to live as is? How's that going to be handled?
So the specific plan addresses some of those questions. So what it does is it says that this is something that would be allowed to meet housing, but this is not the zoning component. With zoning, we would adopt zoning ordinances that would allow that, and the zoning ordinances would have conditions. So first of all, not all areas of the city would be amenable to having people live in. For example, in our rendering and slaughtering areas, just due to odors, probably not a great place for people to be located. And like you said, there are areas with historic contamination. And so certainly part of the permitting and review process would require there to be environmental studies conducted on those sites to see if that was someplace where it would be acceptable for people to live. Again, the housing element is just a very general guidance. Like Phil had said, it's the Constitution. And once we adopt the Constitution, then we have to actually have the regulations that allow it to be implemented.
I'm so sorry, but I actually have another hearing this evening, and so I think I will have to retire at this time. Are there any last questions that I need to answer?
Anything that's super critical for Phil?
Well, one of my questions was actually for Phil. Leticia covered my other one.
Yeah.
Was when we talk about 300 plus units, I was just doing the calculations here on Google Maps. It's about 150,000 square feet. How tall can we go with buildings, and what size of apartments or condos are we thinking about we're going to shoehorn into this area? Because 700 square foot residences don't seem like they would be something that would attract, we'll say medium wealth families or folks who want to live there. So I'm just curious what the calculations come out to. Are we talking about 1,000 square foot residences, 600 square foot residences, a mix from 500 to 1,500? Is there been any analysis on that?
Yeah, so we don't know for sure, right? It just depends on what is ultimately proposed. I actually think that the best thing for the city and the best thing for the market is actually very small studio and 1-bedroom units that'll be occupied by a single young professional that's priced out of downtown, but they want some place that's, alternative and industrial and interesting and be in a development that has, a pool in it and lots of amenities. The buildings, so that's about 75 units per acre, 300 units total. For comparison, that's pretty high, but you see buildings, you see 5 to 7 story buildings built in other areas in LA and Inglewood where we're working that are easily 100 to 150 units per acre.
Okay.
So this kind of building would be probably 5 to 7 stories tall. It would be a large building, but that's roughly the scale.
Are we limited on height, or, I mean, because I'm also thinking about parking, you need parking for all those places, so it seems like several floors of parking plus several floors of residences?
Yeah, probably like 2 floors of parking and then 3 to 5 of residences, kind of going up and down.
Okay.
But certainly it could be taller, but, a high rise is much more expensive to build. So it's probably, it may be a reach that anyone would actually want to build a high rise in this location.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'm so sorry. I will retire. And I thank you all for your comment, and I'll catch up with Dan to make sure that I receive all the rest of the comments from this commission.
Leticia, thank you, Phil. Thank you very much.
No, I was just gonna say, if we have something that's that many, 5, 6 floors, it's really gonna stick out like a sore thumb here in the city of Vernon. So that's another aspect. So I'm trying to better understand, Dan. So this is being brought forward because it's a presentation with no action. You guys are just trying to gauge to see where the commission wants to go, just gauge what our comments are, our thoughts are. Because I don't feel comfortable with agreeing to anything at this point. I think we need to do further study. I'm just wondering what exactly is expected of this element report today.
So we wanted to present this for feedback from the commission. And if the commission was satisfied with this, we would like the commission to make a recommendation to the city council that the city council review and adopt, so that we could submit this to HCD and HCD, and HCD reviews it, and then it comes back to the city council with HCD's changes and then gets formally adopted. However, I've heard a lot of concerns here. And so, and while I think that some of these concerns, for example, the concern about the 300 unit building, this plan does not commit the city to building a 300 unit building. The 300 unit building isn't even contained in this plan. So what this plan has in it, though, what I've heard a little bit of discussion about that's actually contained in this plan is the caretaker housing. So yes, this plan does include caretaker housing, but again, there's no zoning that enables caretaker housing within our city yet. And so once this plan were to be adopted, we would then adopt zoning later at a later time that would enable caretaker housing to be built. And that's when the details would get worked out. And that would be brought both to the Housing Commission and to the City Council. And it would be a very complete package of what the requirements are, where that type of zoning would be allowed, and that kind of thing. How many units per building, if that's based on the square footage of the building, that kind of thing. I'm sorry.
Well, so Dan, so the document that was so the detailed the chart with the housing elements, the 4 different things with the details, you're basically saying you want our blessing that we continue moving forward on this path is basically what you're asking us.
Yes, that is basically what I'm asking.
Even though we don't like certain things, we will have opportunities later on to fix them.
Yes.
Okay.
So this lays out broad policy goals. That's the meat of this document, or the broad policy goals. And I believe that starts on page 8.
Yeah, no, it's 8 and 9. That's where all the meat is.
Right, exactly. And so if there is something in particular that you object to on pages 8 and 9, then now would be a great time to let us know. We could adopt or adapt those and bring it back to the commission. However, if you're okay with these policies, the actual implementation is where we get into the real technical things that it seems like the commission is discussing right now. And so that would be a more appropriate time would be after the housing element update was adopted, and the actual implementation is where I think that's where your focus is. And so we would bring that back on the implementation.
Does that everyone understand? Everyone feel comfortable with that right now?
In
And I know
as
Leticia
far,
has another question.
sorry, as
No, it's
far as the caretaker housing, are we able to conduct like a survey, some type, even if we have to do it through the chamber, like as Vice Commissioner Goff stated, because I just want to see what that would look like. Like, what are the specifications? Like, is it one person? Is it two people that can reside there? Is it a family? Like, I just want to know what exactly that would look like and what that would entail. Because Commissioner Ibarra brought up some good points. If we have people living there, then how are we going to go about that? Because we do have contamination and so forth. So I just would like to have a better understanding and a better picture of exactly what that's going to entail.
Sure. So what the housing element would do is that when it mentions caretaker housing, it means that it's something that could be zoned for caretaker housing. So for zoning, we would have to open up the municipal code and adopt a new zone or a new use to allow for caretaker housing. And that's where we would get into the fine detail of what areas would that be allowed in, how many square feet would we want, what type of environmental considerations would we undertake. So that would all be done at that time when we open up the municipal code to go into the actual details for zoning. And that's a minute ago when I mentioned implementation. So again, this is just a guidance document, but the actual implementation, the details get worked out in the municipal code. And so that would come both before the Housing Commission, since it's housing related, and it would go to the City Council. And that's that would be a big deal. So that would be where we would conduct lots of studies with the business community to see what the appetite is for it. We'd look at other cities. Phil had mentioned 3 other cities that have that as an implemented, so we'd see what the best practices are to actually have caretaker housing and make sure that it's safe for both the residents of that housing and safe in the factory.
So it's obviously we have a very engaged and caring commission here, very involved community, which is fabulous. And it sounds like these items where you're asking for us to say, yeah, we like these conceptually, and we look forward to getting the details and the implementation, because that's going to be scrutinized as well.
Yes, that is exactly.
So I want to be really clear to my fellow commissioners that if we're able to get a motion, all we're really saying is we like these concepts. There's nothing in these concepts. We're not saying we're against. We're in favor of these things under certain conditions that will be spelled out later and debated later. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I think it is.
Is that fair, Dan, to say it that way?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
I don't want to rush this because it's super important, but it's now 7:16 and we have other items on the agenda to get through. And so I would love it if someone felt comfortable making a motion to give Dan what he needs.
I have a comment. So Dan, moving forward, if we go ahead and move forward with this, are you going to be taking into consideration what we've discussed today? Because you can kind of get a feel as to what's going to be accepted or what we're looking forward, moving forward, what we would like to see versus what we didn't like based off of this. So I just want to make sure that I'm not agreeing to some, because there's some things that I do not agree on. So I just want to make sure that that's going to be taken into consideration.
Yes, it will be.
And Leticia, I can assure you that as a member of the West Side Pacific Plan, we have the same issues. So there's a lot of, they've been forced to go back to the drawing board several times. I'm not talking about Dan here, I'm talking about the Arroyo group. Okay. So it's going to be a very, very highly scrutinized process.
Thank you. That helps me be at ease a little more.
And as long as you stay in office, you're gonna ultimately have the final say.
Right,
So-
and so the use of city property is going to come both before the commission and before city council. The West Side specific plan is a whole different element that has to be adopted by the council. It's probably also going to come before the housing commission because it includes a lot of housing potential uses. And then after the plan has been approved, we still have to go through zoning because currently the city doesn't allow for the type of residential zoning that's been there, or even have any areas that are zoned for residential uses other than the Vernon Village Park Apartments.
You know, I just realized I forgot to ask if there's any public comments relative to this. Do we have any public comments?
Currently, there are none on Zoom.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I'm going to ask, how do you want that motion to be formulated? I think we can, I would be glad to make a motion that we recommend that this draft goes forward, but with specific intent that we like the goals on the pages 7 and 8, because really, again, we said that's the beat of it. And I think that's where we are right now, is the high level.
So the motion would be that we agree with conceptually page 7 and 8. I mean, I'm sorry, 8 and 9.
Sorry, 8 and 9? Yes, it
Yeah,
is
8 and 9.
Sorry.
That's all right. So the
Yeah,
motion would,
I think those are the high level goals. So I would happily make that motion that we conceptually agree with the goals outlined on pages 8 and 9 of this draft document.
okay. Do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second.
Thank you. Now,
I'll
Can
call
I-
the roll.
yeah,
Unless
thank you.
Discussion on the motion,
Sorry?
unless you want discussion on the motion.
Well, does anyone want any further discussion before we take a vote? I didn't think so. I felt like we're all pretty much on the same page.
And Dan, are you good with that motion? I know that the recommendation was to recommend that the council adopt the draft housing element update.
Yes, I'm fine with it as long as the goals are as long as there's a recommendation that the goals on pages 8 and 9 are acceptable. I think I can work with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Edry,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. That was really a hearty discussion. We
So
all
now
need
we'll
to
go
have
back.
some food now, right? Does anybody need a bio break or we're going to keep moving? We're all good? We're all wearing Depends? Okay. So now we can go back to the consent calendar, correct, Lisa?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, what does my paper tell me to do there?
Ask for public comments. All matters are on the consent calendar can be approved under
Oh.
one motion.
Okay.
And
All
then-
right, all matters listed on the consent calendar are to be approved with one motion. Items may be removed from the consent calendar by any member of the commission. Those items removed will be considered immediately after the consent calendar. Any comments from the public?
There are currently no raised hands.
All right, since there are no raised hands, can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move Lopez.
I'll
Do I have a
second
second.
Ibarra.
Okay.
Motion by Commissioner Lopez, seconded by Commissioner Ibarra to approve the consent calendar, which is approval of the minutes of September 8th, 2021. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Edry,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. All right. Now we can go to presentations.
Item
Lisa,
number,
may-
sorry, I was just going to read the item.
Okay.
Item number 2 is quarterly city housing report, and Public Works Director Wall will present the item. I think he's working on getting the
I'm
item.
working on getting it up. I'm sorry about this.
It kind of looked like you were frozen, but
Yeah. Okay, Dominic, I'm going to need your help.
Sure thing. I'll go ahead and share the presentation. You just let me know when to go to the next slide.
All right, thank you.
Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, if you could go to the first slide, please. Okay, an overview of this report. We're going to go over the rent register, going to go over our occupancy of units, a summary of the calls received from tenants. We're going to discuss operations for the facilities group. We're going to give you updates, and then we're going to close this off. Next slide. So the rent register. We have an outstanding balance as of the 6th of $12,002.30. 7 of our tenants are behind with their rent. 5 of the 7 are late with just the December rent, and we anticipate that they will be current in the next few days. 1 of our tenants is 3 months behind with their rent, and 1 is 5 months behind with their rent. On September 28th, 2021, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors adopted the Los Angeles County COVID-19 Protections Resolution, which extended certain protections previously in effect under the county's eviction moratorium. The COVID-19 tenant protections are retroactive to March 4th, 2020, and provide affirmative defenses against evictions for residential and commercial tenants through January 31st, 2022. Unless repealed or extended by that board. Under these protections, tenants may not be evicted for COVID-19 related non-payment of rent, as well as no fault reasons, such as denying entry to a landlord, committing a nuisance, or unauthorized occupants or pets if related to COVID-19. Additionally, there continues to be supplementary protections under the state's eviction moratorium. To address issues related to delinquencies with its existing renters, the city will seek financial assistance through the state's program if and when appropriate. We will continue to update the commission as new information becomes available. Next slide, please. So we currently have 3 vacant units. There's a 2-bedroom house that's vacant on Furlong, a 1-bedroom apartment at 50th Street, and a 3-bedroom house on Fruitland. These 3 units are all in move-in ready condition, with the exception of the house on Furlong, which just needs a little bit of interior paint. Next slide. For the months of September, October, and November, we only received 4 calls. 3 were for repairs and 1 was with a question. We responded to all of these calls. We also had a call from the 50th Street Apartments with a noise complaint about one of the businesses in the area that had some machinery that was making exceptionally loud noise. So we've been working with that business. We've gotten their hours of operation for that new piece of equipment to be reduced so that we're not interfering with people's sleep. And they have submitted plans to us for the construction of a sound wall around that equipment. It's a rooftop unit that they have. We will continue to monitor this situation. We'll keep the Housing Commission informed of any outcomes, as well as continue communication with the tenants. Next slide. For our operations group, end of year inspections were completed by November 2021. The only items to be repaired were caused by ordinary wear and tear and included items such as sprinkler adjustments, garage door opener, lights replacement, faucet repair. We do have some vinyl flooring that needs to be replaced in one of the units. And again, it's due to just wear and tear. It's not due to any sort of tenant negligence. We also installed some privacy fencing around each of the houses on Fruitland, and that's what the photo is in the bottom of the picture there. Next slide. So updates. The city will be holding a bulky item pickup event on January 6th to assist Vernon residents with the disposal of items that need to be disposed of after the holiday season, such as Christmas trees. And this is not just for residents in Vernon-owned housing. This applies to residents at the 49th, at the apartments, the Vernon Village apartments, as well as any of the private homes in the city of Vernon. And then we also currently have 52 active housing interest forms for people who would like to participate in a lottery if we have an upcoming lottery, and we have 3 housing transfer requests. Next slide. In closing, Public Works follows established VHC policies and procedures in management practices, including filling vacancies via lottery. We actively inspect and maintain city-owned residential properties in accordance with the best practices for landlords. We manage housing costs in a fiscally responsible manner within the budget that's approved by the City Council. We stay abreast of current events and issues impacting city-owned properties, such as the COVID-19 moratoriums. And we engage tenants through proactive and legally compliant communications to inform of actions and invite feedback. This concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. I think we're now able to go back to new business and go to item 4, Public Works.
Sorry, Chair, I misled you. We do need to finish this item first.
Lisa.
I know, I'm sorry. My fault. We want to see if the commission has any technical questions first.
Of course.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much for that presentation. I do have a couple questions for you. I remember in one of the meetings, we had applied for the grant for up to, I believe, March payment. Do you know where we stand with that?
Yes,
And have we applied for the new one that was extended from April to current?
So we did apply for that original grant from the state. We did receive the monies for that. And so that helped catch that tenant up. And while the state has announced a new grant, they have not issued any applications or guidelines yet. And so we're monitoring that. So actually, City Admin's office is monitoring that on a daily basis. And as soon as that's available, we're going to apply for it, because we're owed several $1,000s at this point.
And are we still sending friendly notices on past due rent for that?
We have not been sending notices to the tenants that are that are severely in arrears. We had sent the original notice, the second round, about the opportunity that was being provided by the state, but we haven't been sending them monthly notices now.
Okay, and then you mentioned there's 3 open houses, correct, right now?
Yes.
I believe one of them, I'm not sure, is from the last time where it was still vacant. Do we have anybody for that, or where do we stand?
So we had conducted a lottery for the home on Fruitland, and we had paused leasing that property. And that's an item that we're actually going to address. That's going to come up. But at the September 8th meeting, we had informed the VHC that we were pausing lotteries and lease activities until after a draft housing element had been provided, because we weren't sure what the housing element was going to recommend at that time. And so now we're ready to bring this back to the commission for direction onto whether or not we should resume housing lotteries. And so you'll see that this evening.
Okay. And just to get back to the current application grant, you said the application's not open for us yet, or?
The actual forms have not been available for us to fill out yet. So, and I know that people in city admin office are continually looking for that application, but it just has not opened. The portal has not opened yet at the state.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good to go? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on to item 4, Public Works.
If there's no other commission comments, we should see if there's any public comments, and then we'll need a motion.
Okay.
And currently there are no public comments.
Okay. So then we do need a motion to, is that, so that's, it's protocol to approve the report. Is that right, Lisa?
Yeah, the motion is to receive and file the report.
Got it. Okay.
I'll make the motion.
I will second that emotion, Ibarra.
Motion by Commissioner Edry, seconded by Commissioner Ibarra to receive and file the report. Vice Chair Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Edry,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we can go to back to new business, item number 4.
Okay. Item number 4.
Item
So this is Vernon housing unit rental rates. In December of 2018, the Housing Commission established a method for determining rents for city-owned housing. For occupied units being rented on a month-to-month basis, rents are increased or decreased by changes in the CPI for the 12-month period ending each August, with a 3% cap on rent increases in any year. The CPI for the 12-month period ending this past August increased by 4%. And so in accordance with the Housing Commission's methodology, rents would be increased in this coming year by 3%. The Housing Commission also established initial rents to be established by the small area fair market rent rates established by HUD each year based on our zip code. Staff is seeking direction from the Housing Commission. And the question is, should rents for existing tenants be increased in this next calendar year by the 3% under the present methodology? And should the initial rents used to fill vacancies be those established by HUD for this next calendar year? This concludes my report and I'm available for questions.
This is all new to me, so I don't understand, like, you're basically, we're required to follow, we are or we are not required to follow prior precedent, or are you saying that we can?
I'm asked that the reason why this is being brought forward is this the rental rates were something, the methodology for increasing rents was something that was established by the Housing Commission in December of 2018. And I'm just checking in with the commission to see if they desire to continue doing that in this year, especially this may be an unusual year because of the impact that COVID has had on our community.
I saw a hand up. Did it go down?
That was my hand, sorry.
No.
Accidentally.
So are you saying then, Dan, we have, if I understand this correctly, we are able to, if we choose to, increase rates by as much as 3%. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So
we could do 0, or we could go from 0 to 3%.
Yes, the Housing Commission has the ability to provide staff with direction on how they would like to increase the rents. There is a 3% cap that had been adopted by the Housing Commission in December of 2018. And it's based on, so basically CPI was the cap unless the consumer price index increased by more than 3%, and then 3% was the absolute ceiling that it could be adjusted by.
I think people are barely starting to get on their feet with the whole pandemic situation. So to increase it, I think maybe we could probably hold off until things get better for everybody.
Historically, what has the commission done? Is it because this is a once a year
thing? So historically, the commission has followed the CPI increases, and also for existing month-to-month tenants, and then for new tenancies, the rate of rent has been the small area market rates that are established by HUD. This year, those HUD rates, they're included in your staff report, but they've gone up. The year-to-year increase in the HUD rents have gone 9.6 for one bedrooms and an 8.7% for the 3-bedroom. So significant increases in those initial rents. And then our existing tenants are looking at a 3% increase unless the commission directs staff otherwise.
All right, let me say it correctly. Ronit, did I do it right?
Yes, you did. So can we, I go by Renee also, if it makes it.
Oh, I
any
like
easier.
that.
So would it then make sense to make a motion for new residents coming in? We could ask for slightly higher rents, and for existing, maybe hold off with the increases, just because we're going through a pandemic and.
Yes.
What's
the commission could make that, you could make that recommendation.
can I then make this recommendation? How is everyone else? What is everyone else thinking?
The one question I have is if the consumer price index continues to increase this year, which looks likely, that means the rents would be then needing to get caught up over the next couple of years, because if we have a 4% or 5% rise in the consumer price index this year, we could be 6, 7, 8% behind where we're targeting to be for rents. And I guess I'm comfortable with that, but at 3%, we may be behind the ball than trying to catch up.
Is that what's required, that we would have to catch up, Dan?
No, we wouldn't have to catch up. That's completely at the discretion of the commission.
Okay, Marlene's hand just went down.
I would hold off on CPI though and approve the HUD. Like I said, you were already struggling with our tenants alone catching up. A lot of people are barely getting back on their feet. I think it would make it more devastating to some of our renters to do this now.
But isn't the HUD higher than the 3%?
So the HUD is just for new tenants. The HUD, a lot of our rent is far below market. And that has historic reasons for it. So these CPI increases were just to try to get us toward market a little bit. But when we get a brand new tenant, they have the option, they don't currently live here. And so if they know what the rent is and they agree to that, then that's what they've agreed to. So. And we use HUD in lieu of a market survey because HUD provides us with that data, and there's not a lot of comparables for us to try to use, but HUD has a lot of resources available to it to determine what the fair rent is for Vernon, for a new tenant.
Okay. So
how does everyone feel of going half, like doing 1.5% instead of the 3%, so that, because I do understand what Commissioner Ibarra is mentioning, because we do have some tenants that are behind on rent and so forth. So kind of to not make it that much of an impact, maybe 1.5% to kind of meet in the middle.
I tend to agree with you on this one.
Myself as well.
I'm comfortable with that.
Who's going to make the motion?
I shall. So to increase rents this coming January 2022, 1.5% instead of the standard 3%.
And do we need to have do we need a friend? Do we need to make a friendly amendment or address the HUD rate for new tenants to leave it alone, or does that matter? Those two separate things.
You could do it separately, or you could combine them.
Lisa, what do you want us to do?
One motion is fine. I do want to see if there's any public comment though before we continue.
Oh, right.
Public
comment. Do we have any?
This time there's none on Zoom.
Okay.
I can go ahead and add that to my motion and just indicate that the HUD rents stay the same or stagnant, just because of the same reason. And people that are entering and moving in, they're already going to be paying a higher rent anyways. So I don't know if everyone agrees to that.
So just to confirm, your motion is to increase the rent by 1.5% and to approve the HUD rates for the new people coming in?
The current rates, right?
HUD rates.
Yeah, the current
Okay.
HUD rates.
Okay,
So
that's your
you
motion,
don't,
right?
I'm sorry, may I get some clarification? So on the HUD rate, currently a one bedroom would rent for $1,250. HUD has proposed that on January 1st, the rent increase to $1,370. So would you want the rate that goes up in January 1st, or do you want to continue in this next year with the current new rental rates?
I'm motioning to go ahead and keep the current rate that we have, because I remember when we were trying to rent the one on Fruitland, we were having difficulty because the rent was already higher. So I think that we should just leave it as is for now.
Okay, thank you.
So can we hear the motion again? Please.
I believe, sorry, I have a lot of windows
Thank
open.
you, Lisa. Thank you.
I have a lot of windows open on my tiny computer. We're going to increase rental rates for city-owned residential units by 1.5% for calendar year 2022 and retain the existing rates for new tenants. Is that right, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. So that's Leticia's motion, and we had a second for it already?
I'll second it. Ibarra.
Thank you.
All right.
Motion by Commissioner Lopez, seconded by Commissioner Ibarra to increase rental rates by 1.5% and retain the current rates for new tenants. Vice Chair Goff.
Aye.
Commissioner Edry.
Aye.
Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. We're now on to number 5.
Yes. So, Honorable Chair and Commissioners, the item before you seeks the Housing Commission's recommendation to the City Council that the City Council approve and authorize submittal of a permanent local housing allocation application to the Department of Housing and Community Development. The application seeks $392,000 from the state to be used by Vernon to address unmet housing needs in the community. The funds can be used for a number of eligible activities listed in the agenda report. If awarded, the city plans to use this funding towards new home ownership opportunities. If this use proves to be infeasible, the city has the ability to ask Housing and Community Development to amend the plan. This concludes my report.
Anybody have any questions? I do. Okay, so this is a grant that we're applying for from the state that we would, for the purpose of helping people get into home ownership. Is that what I understood?
So there's a number of different uses that the money can be used for. The city has, city staff thought that the most attractive use for us was to help people have home ownership. Yes.
Okay.
If that proves to not be something that's feasible during the 5-year duration of the plan, we're able to amend the plan with the state.
And what are the other uses?
So as listed in the staff report, they have pre-development, development, acquisition, rehabilitation, and preservation of multifamily housing, pre-development of accessory dwelling units, matching funds to be placed for local or regional housing trust funds. So that's the development of low-income housing, matching funds for the Housing Asset Fund, capitalized reserves for services connected to preservation and creation of new permanent supportive housing. So that'd be like transitional type housing.
So there's lots of other uses.
There's lots of other uses. And again, if we find that we're not able to use the money for homeownership opportunities, then we would certainly pivot towards one of these other uses, and we would bring this to the Housing Commission for your approval before we made those changes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Do we have any public comments? I beat you to that one, Lisa.
Yep.
I'm catching on.
There are currently no raised hands on Zoom.
All right. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second Lopez.
Motion by Commissioner Edry, seconded by Commissioner Lopez to recommend the City Council approve and authorize the submittal of the application. Vice Chair Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Edry,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Right. Moving right along, we are now on item number 6.
Dan, if I could just read the title. Item 6 is city-owned housing vacancies and future housing lotteries. Now it's all you.
All right. At the September 8th, 2021 VHC meeting, the commission received a presentation on the housing element update process, and staff announced a temporary pause on leases and lotteries due to several considerations surrounding the city's housing element update. Our vacant units are a 1-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom house, and a 3-bedroom house. In order to fill available vacancies in city-owned housing, VHC lease-up procedures require lotteries be conducted to establish a priority list for individuals that have submitted either a unit transfer request form or a housing expression of interest form for vacant city-owned housing. With a draft of the housing element now complete, staff is requesting direction from the commission to resume housing lotteries to fill vacancies.
Anyone have any questions? I do. Dan, why would we not?
I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't. So it's just because we had informed the commission of the pause. Would like your permission to go ahead and start filling them.
Okay. Are there any public comments? Or anybody else have any other questions? Any public comments?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay. May I have a motion?
I'll move Lopez.
I'll
Second?
second Ibarra.
You got to unmute, Lisa. What a rookie move.
Rookie, I heard that. Motion by Commissioner Lopez. It's good because I was stuttering on council member and trying to get it right. Motion by Commissioner Lopez, seconded by Commissioner Ibarra. Authorize staff to proceed with housing lotteries. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Edry,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Navarez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ibarra.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. All right, now we go to oral reports. You're gonna see me leave my screen because my battery's about to die. That's how long this meeting's going. So I'm gonna go get my battery and I'll be right back.
My battery's about to die too.
We're so close. We're so close. Did staff have any oral reports?
No, none.
I would just like to remind the commission that next week on December 15th, we have the Joint Business and Industry Commission, Green Vernon Commission, Housing Commission at 2:30 to discuss the local hazard mitigation plan. And I believe we're going to need a special housing commission meeting to conduct a housing lottery. And we're going to try to do that at 2:15. So hopefully everyone's available a little bit earlier than our 2:30 meeting that most of you have confirmed that you're available for. So we'll start at 2:15 with the Housing Commission, Special Housing Commission for the housing lottery. And then at 2:30, we'll have the joint business industry, Green Vernon and Housing Commissions receiving a presentation on the local hazard mitigation plan. Any other staff have any announcements? Any commissioners have any directives to staff? Zaina, did you have anything? I saw you just pop on. I wasn't sure.
Obviously, I
Well,
didn't make it in time.
No, you're good. I was just reminding the commission of the meetings next week on December 15th. 2:15, we'll do a special housing commission for the lottery, and 2:30, a joint meeting with the BIC, GVC, and Housing Commission for the local hazard mitigation plan. And there were no reports or directives from the commission, so I think,
We can adjourn at 7:53.
yes,
Okay.
excellent job. Thank you. We'll see you next
Thank
week.
you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
good night,
everyone.
everyone.